earn more money but too busy to start a side hustle? Do it the right way and teach your money to make more money for yourself, even when you're asleep. Dale Corpus will show you just how here on the School of Cash Flow. With his entrepreneurial mindset and extensive experience in real estate and finance, Dale will help you become a responsible, strategic, and passionate passive real estate investor. Learn how you can increase your earnings or find more ways to make money, only here on the School of Cash Flow.
Hey, good morning and welcome to the School of Cash Flow podcast. I'm the host, Dale Corpus. My guest today, I met initially doing a Spartan race in Dallas back in June of this year. His name is Gabriel Hamel. We're both in GoBundance together. And this year, GoBundance started a Spartan race team. And once I heard GoBundance was forming a Spartan team, I was totally in. I mean, I've done Spartan races before the Dallas event. Like I've done a sprint, a few supers, and even the one beast in Lake Tahoe years back. So I knew what to expect, and I'm totally into pushing myself with these types of events. And also, what better way to combine fitness, mental toughness, talking about real estate, self-improvement, and networking with other like-minded guys, all while doing an obstacle course race. So my next Spartan race with these guys is next month in October in SoCal, and I'm excited for that. Gabriel's one of the co-captains for the team, and he's in tip-top shape year-round. And here's a little bit more about Gabe as well. He lives in Eugene, Oregon. He has a wife with his wife and two boys. He prioritizes a few things in his life, his family being number one, followed by health, happiness, and building wealth through real estate. In 2005, at 23 years old, after returning home from the Iraq War with the U.S. Army, he purchased his first single-family property, and he purchased another one in 2006, and then another in 2007. And he spent from 2009 to 2019, investing in small and medium-sized multifamily properties, mixed-use commercial buildings, and mobile home parks. He currently holds 40 million plus real estate portfolio consisting of roughly 400 multifamily, mixed-use, and mobile home parks and commercial units. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Gabe. How are you?
Hey, good deal. Thanks. That was quite the introduction. So, thank you.
Well, it's like, you're quite the guest. Before we hopped on this call, I just made a comment. And I was like, I know you live in Eugene, Oregon, and I was expecting you to be. I know you travel a lot, so I was expecting you to be traveling and whatnot, and be recording from off site. So it's just like it was a surprise to see that you're actually at home.
I am at home. Love to travel, but when I'm traveling, I like to just travel and be present with the family. And when I'm home, I like doing stuff like this. So
what's your travel like? Not even related to real estate, but just learning more about you. What's your travel schedule like, or how often are you traveling?
Yeah, I mean, I never have to travel. It's only it's for fun.
Yeah.
Just to see places. So yeah, last year I went to Maui for a couple times. Once for a month with the family, and then I went back there for a real estate mastermind meetup, which was awesome. And then right before we were recording, I was telling you we bought an RV last year and did a 2-month road trip. So it was kind of crazy because we had never RV'd camp, bought the RV, basically parked it, and then went to Hawaii for the mastermind. And then we came back and literally just like jumped in the RV and took off for 2 months. And then, I don't know, outside of that, we've done a lot of cool stuff this year. We went to Necker Island, Richard Branson's island, my wife and I and some other couples, and got to hang out with Richard. That was pretty amazing, and ended up on some other islands. And we're actually headed back to the Virgin Islands in March. And we just did a short 2-week road trip to Glacier and Yellowstone and the Tetons, and that was just amazing. And we saw bears really up close. We hiked up and jumped into the glacier water. I brought my paddleboard with me and got out there on the water. It was just a beautiful part of the country.
That's amazing. Like that RV experience, one of these days, it's actually on my bucket list to do an RV road trip with my own family. The fact that you're gone for 2 months, was it an entire cross country road trip? Or did you stay to one area of the United States?
Yeah, we did eight, kind of the 8 Western states. So we literally didn't have a plan when we jumped in there. We started to go north. My wife's family's up there. So that was our only planned stop, was Spokane. And then we went over to Idaho and started hitting up the hot springs and into Montana. And then we thought, and this was like in April of last year. And it was like, why are we headed up north to the cold? Let's go south. And so some places we stayed a night, some 2-3 nights, some a week. And we really just kind of made it up as we went. Sometimes we stayed in nice RV resorts, and other times we were literally camping in the middle of the desert with no one around us. So it was just a mix of everything, and it was amazing.
While you're on the RV trip, I know you're really into fitness and whatnot. How did you manage even just like your fitness routine while you're on the road, out of curiosity?
Yeah, the timing was actually pretty amazing. So right before we went, I mentioned going to that real estate mastermind in Maui.
Yeah.
I actually tore my bicep in Maui a day before the mastermind. I have a wrestling background. I was rolling around with some jiu-jitsu guys, and tore my bicep completely. But I had no pain. I had full range of motion, and I was like, I'll just take care of this when I get back. So spend the 10 days in Maui. So I came back with the torn bicep and also COVID. Everyone got COVID pretty much. That met up at the mastermind, and we're supposed to leave on this road trip like a week later. So I go in and was like, hey, my arm feels fine, but this doesn't look right. There's a big gap between like where it's supposed to attach at the elbow. Yeah. They do the MRI and they're like, man, your bicep's not attached at all. If you want, any muscle at all, it's going to atrophy if you don't get it reattached. So I basically came back, got it reattached, and then we jumped in the RV and about a week later and took off. And so it kind of forced me to modify my workouts. I never stopped working out. I'm very cautious of that arm, but I do a lot of body weight training stuff too. And so you can take that anywhere on the road, And so I just stayed consistent. But yeah, with the bicep tear, it definitely kind of forced me to change things up a little bit.
How does one reattach the bicep? Was it an easy operation type of deal?
Yeah, like it was weird because even when I tore it, it almost felt like my funny bone, right? And so I was like, it doesn't hurt. I have full range of motion. I could do push-ups. I basically do anything. It just hurt if I try to like lift something or that curling motion. And like surgery is the last thing that I considered, or I didn't think it could be torn. I was like, this is just going to go back in place. This is some weird thing. So I was a little bit surprised because I had full mobility. And then after the surgery, I really had to let it heal. They basically at the forearm, kind of where your arm bends, they just cut in and they basically pull it back and reattach it.
How did it even happen? I mean, were you working out too much?
No. So I don't know if you know Brandon Turner and Tarl Yarber. Those guys are super in jiu-jitsu. So imagine a bunch of real estate investors. They bring over their jiu-jitsu coach. I was a high school wrestler and a high school wrestling coach for years. And so they were showing and I've rolled around with jiu-jitsu guys before, but that's not my sport. It's not my background. So a bunch of real estate guys and girls doing some jiu-jitsu. And then they're like, hey, let's have some live goes. And so me and Tarl, I don't know if you know Tarl, he puts on like the Limitless event and some other events. And a few of the guys are like, kick Tarl's ass. So I start on my back and, I get up and we're scrapping around and I take him down and it literally just felt like I hit my funny bone. I wish I could say he did something really advanced and cool, but I looked down, he has my wrist. I looked down at my biceps like 3 inches higher, up towards my shoulder. And I was like, all right, what's going on here?
Yeah. Wow. At least they're back in one piece. We're now it's so going back to just real estate. I want to learn more about just your real estate, journey and how that evolved and like, what made you even think about getting into real estate investing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I guess going back to high school, I never really knew what I wanted to do. I was attracted to business. I just didn't know, what that might look like. And in my mind as a kid, business, it was a stuffy suit in a high-rise, building. And most of the time I'm in t-shirt and sweatpants or t-shirt and jeans, these days. And so, I really stayed in high school for the social aspect. And because I wrestled, that was important to me. That's really what kept me in school. I'm not sure I would have stayed in otherwise. Like it was hard for me to sit still in class and to pay attention. And also it was hard for me, like I couldn't relate, like how does this relate to the real world? It was hard for me to connect the dots of how is what I'm learning in school get applied to real life. And I joined, so in high school, my senior year, I joined the Army National Guard. It was an infantry unit, and we were doing the 1 week in a month thing. I had a buddy that I wrestled with. He's like, hey, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, just like the commercial. And I was like, all right, cool. We go play in the woods 1 week in a month. I knew that the likelihood of being deployed, I knew it was possible, but it was very unlikely. That unit hadn't been deployed since World War II. Most National Guard units hadn't, but so kind of combining those two things, I had joined my senior year. I graduated high school. I'm taking some odd and end jobs. I'm doing the 1 week in a month thing. And then I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, like 2 years later, around 2002, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that was really the book, like many people, they read it and it's not a how-to book and it's not a overly complicated book. It's just simply put, like how to create financial freedom and how the model that most of us are taught is very different than those that are creating financial success. And so it was the first book that I read word for word, cover to cover, that just it was actually the first book I'd ever read, like fully through. And it was the first thing I'd ever read that I wanted to read and wanted to keep learning about. And so 2002, I made up my mind, like in my head, I was like, I will be financially free through real estate. Like it just made sense. And then shortly after that, 2003, I get deployed to Iraq. And so I'm in Kuwait and Iraq for a year, but I'm constantly thinking about the lessons in that, in that book and some of the other books I read after. And in my mind, I was like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to start buying real estate. And so I got back in 2004 and I bought my first house in 2005. And that was really the beginning of my real estate journey. It was kind of the mindset first. I had decided first in my mind that this is what I was going to do. And this would be my path to success and be my path to building wealth. And then the rest of it, I just had to make up and learn as I went, like a lot of us.
Yeah, no, it's like you found your calling. Like if you read a book, that was your first book you finished from beginning to end, like that's your calling. yeah.
And I was like 19 years old too, right? Like I got all the way through school without ever reading a book. Like it just, again, it was like, how does this relate to my life? Even though I didn't know what my life might look like, it was hard. I did see a lot of people, my parents, working, low paying jobs. I saw a lot of people that went to work doing things that they didn't like. And I was like, this isn't what I want. There has to be more. And what that looked like, I don't know. And then that book really just kind of gave me words and direction to a piece of my life that I think was missing and didn't even realize it.
So, like, for example, your family weren't real estate investors. I take it you figured this out all on your own, right?
Yeah, they weren't in the business. Definitely not real estate.
Tell me more about that first investment. You just came out of the military, right? And that's when you bought your first home. How did you go about doing it? Did you have even any money to work with, or like how'd you go about it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think I have a good answer. You're a mortgage broker,
yeah,
right? Okay.
Yeah, mortgage and real estate. Yeah.
When did you start? When did you start?
In lending 01.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think you'll appreciate this more than most people. So I get back in 2004 and I go to a mortgage broker and I don't have money and I don't have a job and I don't have a down payment. I don't have income coming in. And this broker's like, he's like, I can get you a loan. And I was like, no kidding. And this is back during the subprime. This is 2004 when I started looking, but bought the first house in 2005. And it was an 80-20 loan. It was an 80% loan from one lender and a 20% from another. And
Zero down.
Zero down. And it was 100% financed. And I'm just doing the math. This is before, the term house hacking. You'd hear everyone throw around house hacking. It just made good financial sense to rent out 2 of the bedrooms and live for less. So I bought a very modest 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, no money down, rented out 2 of the bedrooms, and I lived for less than I could anywhere else. And I was like, gosh, that was really easy. That's 2005. I go back to the bank in 2006. I do it again, go back in 2007, do it again. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this is easier than the books say. So my initial plan, I was like, I'm just going to go buy a house every year. I'm just going to go back to the bank and do a no money down deal as long as I can rent the house out for more than what my mortgage is. This is easy. And in 20 years, I'll have 20 houses. That was my initial plan. Well, then 2008 rolls around and I go back to the bank and say, hey, I want to buy another house. Now, 2008 is also my first son was born. I had a small nutrition store that I had opened and then I closed it. No, it just never really made any money. And so when I went back to the bank, they said, you don't qualify at all. Guidelines have changed, and you've been in the mortgage industry, they said, you don't qualify. You don't have a job. You don't have income. You don't have a down payment. And I'm saying, well, yeah, but I have these 3 houses. Yeah. And last year and the year before, not only did you let me buy a house, like you let me buy a house with no money down. And they're like, yeah, that'll probably never happen again. Guidelines have changed. You actually need a down payment. You actually need income. You actually, need a job. Why don't you go find a job and come back in a few years after you've, got enough for a down payment? And they're talking 20% down, 30% down on investment properties. And I'm just doing the math. Like, I don't have a job, like I'm qualified for nothing, maybe a minimum wage job. So yeah, I took a bunch of odd and end jobs, eventually landing a job in a high school special education class, working 30 hours a week. And it was, barely above minimum wage. And I was like, this is what I want to do forever. And so I remember briefly reading about private money, hard money, and seller financing. And I knew nobody with money. I didn't feel comfortable or didn't feel like I had the experience yet to borrow hard money. I was just figuring it out. And so I thought seller financing would be my path. And so from 2008, for about a year, I just every night would look on Craigslist for seller financing deals. I would just literally type in the words owner financing, seller financing. And it took about a year, and I did my first seller finance deal in 2009. It was 2 duplexes side by side. So 4 units. It was a no money down seller finance deal. My only criteria back then is it had the cash flow. That cash flowed almost as much, almost to the dollar that I was making at my low paying job. And so I finished out that year. I stopped working in 2009. And then from 2009 through 13, I did all no money down seller finance deals. And I got so addicted to the no money down seller finance deals. It was high leverage, but I had nothing to lose. And my criteria was it had to be cash flow positive. I wasn't buying properties to bank and on the appreciation or what could I sell this for? It was I bought everything with the intention to hold on to it forever. Now I have sold some, properties through the years, but that was my criteria. Cash flow positive. I have nothing to lose. The worst case scenarios, I give the property back if I had a default, which I never did. And I just kept picking up single family, small multifamily, small apartments from 09 through 13, all no money down seller finance.
Wow.
And that's how I initially built up my portfolio. And I have never traditionally financed a property since. I've never traditionally financed a property ever, other than maybe those 3 subprime, if you can consider that traditional, but even that wasn't so traditional.
Yeah. Can I ask you, regarding the seller financing deals right now, are they still seller financed, or did you switch them over to conventional loans too?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so in 2014, I had picked, by 2014, I'd picked up several of these properties. And by 2014, interest rates were low again. They were in the low 4s. Prices were back up. Now, a lot of people were like, you're crazy to be buying in 09 and 10 and 11. What if prices go down? And I was like, I don't care what it looks like on paper, even though those properties have appreciated throughout the years, and some of them a lot. I was like, I don't care what it's worth. As long as my tenants can pay rent, I can pay my mortgage. And so, in 2014, interest rates dropped, prices were up. I had better tenants paying more rent, and I refinanced all those properties into long-term fixed debt at 4. I think a lot of them were all the single family, if I remember, and duplex were at 4.125. My 3 to 6 were all 4.25. And what I realized is by 2014, I realized all these properties are now financed with long-term fixed debt that I wouldn't have been able to qualify before. And the difference is they all appraised out 70% LTV or better. And I'm like, I have this built-in equity that came from nowhere. It didn't come from a down payment. Had I put 30, I didn't even have the ability to do it. Had I even had the ability to put 30% down on every one, it would have been so much money out of pocket, which I didn't have. And now in 2014, I'm in the exact same position with the exact loans that I would have had to put 30% down on every single one of these 4. And so I was like, this makes more sense to me. And I've kind of just used that strategy and obviously other strategies throughout the year too, or throughout the years to complement seller financing. But I mean, I think we're coming into a market where we're going to see a lot more seller financing as well.
Yeah, that's cool. You just talked a lot about a lot of stuff that I want to just even, go back and, unpack some of it. It's just like you're talking about, buying using 80/20 back in the early 2000s, just, flash gives me flashbacks to just how I started the business in my 20s. It was very fun and exciting, being in that mortgage industry, the pre-mortgage crisis days. It was really that easy on the origination side. I mean, one of the lenders that I worked for at one point in time back before the credit crash was Countrywide, and they had a mortgage product called Fast and Easy. Just you state your income and state your assets. All they do is do a verbal verification of employment. You're good to go. Your loan funds. It was that easy, and it was fast. But it's kind of, it's funny. I even myself, my first property that I bought, just not a rental, but the one that I, purchased myself, it was zero down. It's just kind of like that first property I was able to leverage to be able to buy other stuff. But it's just like, it's kind of, it's interesting. I really do appreciate your story, because everything just shit hit the fan when the mortgage crisis happened and nobody could qualify for anything, and let alone, have any, and I'm curious, like the properties that you initially bought, before the mortgage credit crash, were you even still able to keep them? I mean, because most people who are doing interest only types of loans back then, that were also adjustable rates, which is totally different from now, where everybody's mostly getting a 30-year fix for the most part. But it's like everybody was caught up just getting interest only 80/20 ARMs, and then they couldn't refinance and they were stuck. Were you also stuck too with your initial properties during that mortgage credit crash? And
yeah, I also, refinanced those at one point too.
Yeah.
Those first three properties, I also refinanced those during that time. And so I have, of those initial three properties, I've sold two of those now, and one of them I still have as a rental. But I didn't sell those until those ones that I bought in 05 and the one I bought in 05 and 07, I didn't sell those until 2019.
Got it. No, it's like even one of the rental properties I bought before the credit crash happened, it's just like I was basing cash flow off, positive cash flow off interest only payments. And that was like totally wrong to do. That's not what you do. But it's just like I had to, ride things out. Like at one point, the interest only period ended, but it became fully amortized. But luckily for me, the rates ended up being variable at the time, but they were low. And I had to wait for a point in time where there was enough principal pay down and the equity went up, because it was underwater for quite some time. But, time in real estate heals all wounds, because, it just ended up balancing out when I was still able to make a profit.
Yeah. And I think that says a lot, because I think that, especially with newer investors, I think it's easy to look at like, how do you make a quick buck, right? Like people look at wholesaling and flipping, and there's nothing wrong with it. It is a way to make money. But making money and building wealth aren't the same. And I was really focused less about making money. Like it had to be cash flow positive, because I didn't want to be backwards in that. But I cared less about what do I owe. It was, how do I acquire assets? How do I acquire assets that I hold? And so even properties that I've sold, which aren't very many, it's only because the appreciation is there. And so I've held them long enough to then go, okay, the cash flow is good, but what's my return on appreciation? Can I take this appreciation and go put this into a property that's going to cash flow more and potentially increase in value even more over the long term? Yeah. I just don't like relying on, I don't like relying on the upside. And, in 2012, I went to a real estate event. It was the first real estate event I had gone to. And I met a lot of people that got their ass kicked in 08. Yeah. And the ones that didn't were really focused on cash flow first. Mm-hmm. Even if on paper the value went down, it was, hey, did the financials still support themselves? Because the fundamentals of investing don't change. And those that I met that really got their ass kicked, it was very speculative. Like, this property has to go up in value. Rents have to go up for this to work. And it did for a while until it didn't. And some of these people, you're talking tens of millions of dollars. And so for me, it's just a way that I hedge my risk is, does the property work today when I buy it and into the foreseeable future, if I do nothing else, if I don't have to rely on the upside. Now, we've had a ton of appreciation and I like that. And you can build a lot of wealth and through that appreciation, I just don't like to rely on it.
Yep, I get it. Yeah, it's like, even if the property happened to have negative equity, and whatnot, provided that it's still cash flow positive, you could still write it out. The equity will come, eventually, because you could stand the test of time just with the cash, with the cash flow coming in. So that's really cool. Hey, I wanted to, regarding seller financing, I know what it is myself, but like a lot of folks might be newer to it. Like, why would a seller even offer seller financing? To be like, can you just talk more about that? So just explain a little bit more what seller financing is for those that are brand new to even hearing what it is.
Yeah, you're asking like good question. You're asking all. I mean, I can talk about all these things forever because I love talking about it. So just cut me off whenever you need.
Okay.
With seller financing, like, again, I mentioned for me it was out of necessity because the banks told me no. But essentially, what seller financing is rather than someone going and getting a bank loan, a Bank of America, Wells Fargo, instead of getting a bank loan and making your payments to a bank, the seller is financing the property for you. And so you're making your payments directly to the seller. And there's lots of reasons why a seller might want to carry financing. I didn't know initially why. I kind of had an idea. But what I found through the years is not every seller wants to be cashed out. So if you think of like the typical seller, it might be their personal property. They sell the property, they go get a mortgage and buy another house. But a lot of times, and in fact, every seller who's ever carried financing for me, they're investors themselves. And the reason that they want to carry financing is they don't want to be cashed out because they don't want to pay the capital gains all at once. They don't want to be cashed out because they're at usually an age or a place in their investing cycle where they don't even want to actively invest and do a 1031 exchange. Mm-hmm. They don't want to cash out, be taxed, and then go put that in the stock market, right? Mm-hmm. And so for a seller, one of the biggest advantages is they become the bank essentially on an asset that in a lot of cases they've owned for 20, 30, 40 years, an asset that they're already comfortable with. And so, and there are some nuances to this, but essentially they're taking a first lien position on the property. You take title, you own it just like you would if you got a bank mortgage, and you're making your payments directly to them.
Okay, got it. So when you were doing for seller financing deals, what type of are sellers being competitive even with the rates that they're offering for it? Is it, for example, competitive with market conventional rates at the time that you're buying it, or is it a lot higher?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that's really one of the questions I get asked most is what are typical seller finance terms? Yeah. And there are no typical terms because unlike a bank, you go into a bank and they tell you, hey, here's what you need to qualify. Here's the down payment. Here's the interest rate. And until you're getting into big commercial properties, there's not a lot of negotiating between you and the bank. The bank kind of tells you, hey, here's what it is, take it or leave it. Seller financing, it really comes more down to what is the seller's needs and what are your needs, and can you create a scenario that gives the seller what they want and also still work for you. And so for some sellers, it's the down payment. For some sellers, it's the interest rate. For some sellers, it's what is that monthly payment amount? It's a dollar amount that they want. And there's a variety of reasons, but the biggest value is it's usually one of those things. Is it price? Is it down payment? Is it interest rate? What's their sticking point? And can you give them that and then be creative or flexible in the other aspects of the deal to still make the deal work for you? I was very fortunate, like early on, that these sellers that I found, I had to find sellers that didn't care as much about a down payment because I didn't have a down payment. And so, and sometimes it's actually not even the price or interest or down payment. An example I share a lot is there was a guy he had a commercial property and 7 multifamily properties, and it was listed and they were advertising it as a development project. And a lot of people kept making these cash offers, and the listing expired. And I knew that strong cash offers came in and he kept rejecting them. And I talked to him and said, what is it about these offers? Like, how come, I know some cash offers came in. Why didn't this sell? And he's like, I'm really not looking to be cashed out. He goes, I have no family to pass this down to. He's like, what I really want is income for the next 15 years. And he said, there's this nonprofit organization that's near and dear to me that if I pass away during, those 15 years, I want those monthly payments to go to that organization. Nobody knew that because everybody's making these offers very transactionally. No one took the time to know what he wanted. Even his own listing broker marketed this thing as a development project. And so that they were basing this value on, someone buying this for cash, tearing it down and developing it. That's not what the guy wanted. he was flexible on price, down payment, and interest rate, but he wanted to make sure that he had income and that if he passed away, this organization would be taken care of years to come. And so that short conversation allowed me to create an offer that benefited him, gave him what he wanted, and the deal still worked for me. And I've never done a seller finance deal. And here, the other question I get asked a lot is like, what's your pitch? Or how do you convince a seller to carry financing? I have never to this day ever convinced a seller to carry financing. I've gotten in front of enough sellers that already want to carry financing. And the only thing I say to them is, hey, what kind of terms would you be interested in? That's all I ask them. And then I shut up and I listen and I hear what kind of terms they'd be interested in. And by asking that simple question, hey, what kind of terms would you be interested in? I hear it's either price, down payment, or interest rate. And then I take that information and it's like, how can I marry those things together? How can I give them what they want and still make the deal work for me? Sometimes you're just too far off from one another. They're like, I want 50% down and, whatever, 1,000,000% interest. And you're like, this doesn't make any financial sense.
So is it possible to find 100% seller finance deals even now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's tricky. I think it's relationship based. I mean, a couple of years ago, I did a 2% down seller finance deal. It was a mobile home
very
park.
low. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 2% down. It was very strong. It was a almost 200% cash on cash return. And this was someone I built a relationship with. Like I got to know. I was never trying to buy a mobile home park when I met the guy. He was a developer that I reached out to almost a decade before, simply because, and I share this story a lot too.
Yeah.
It's relationships. I admired his work. He was building a bunch of stuff in town, like these new beautiful apartments. And I'm like, who is this guy? What's his story? And I reached out to him, and it was years later after I bought my first mobile home park, and we'd stayed in touch, right? But it's not like we became best friends. We stayed in touch. And he said, hey, my friend's selling a single family home in the town over. Are you interested in this? And I said, I'm not buying single family anymore. I'm really focused on mobile home parks. And he's like, no kidding. He's like, I have a few parks, And I was like, would you sell them? He's like, yeah, there's one I want to sell. And I said, would you sell or finance it? He said, absolutely. So even him being a very sophisticated investor, his time and energy, his expertise was not in the mobile home park space. So he had these mobile home parks. We already had a relationship. So he knew and liked and trusted me. And it was very simple. It was like, price, interest rate, down payment. What's most important to you? I mean, I remember going in and talking with him for 45 minutes. About 40 minutes of that was just talking about life. And the other 5 minutes was literally brought out a yellow, lined piece of paper and was like, all right, let's figure out terms. And it was a handshake. And then we had the attorneys write it up and that was the deal. And so those deals, they're still out there. I sold 4 properties this year, no money down seller financing to someone.
You as a seller giving it to a buyer. Yeah, you're paying it forward.
I did that for the first time, but it's still a win-win because I know, like, and trust this couple. They have the skill set to go in there. And these were some of my older these were actually some of my original seller finance deals that I bought, but I sold them because I have a very strong equity position in these properties. They're older properties. There's going to be a lot of deferred maintenance over the years, and it's not the best use of my money I want to go acquire larger properties. So it's not the best use of my money to go put hundreds of thousands of dollars into these properties to maximize the rent. But they have the skill set to go do that. They're going to go, the husband of the couple is physically going in there, rehabbing these properties. So they presented me with a no money down offer. Yeah. And it was part funny and I part loved it because they offered me something. I'm like, this makes sense. This is like what I would have offered if I was them. And they said, hey, we have money, but we don't, instead of a down payment, we really want to put this money into the property so that we can maximize the rent and increase the value of the property so that we can refi out in a few years and pay you off. And so I was happy to do that because these were properties that over the next several years would have cost me a lot in deferred maintenance. It's a win for them. It's a win for me. We both walk away feeling like we've won and are coming out ahead.
That's cool. That's a really cool feeling. Yeah. Regarding the seller financing deals, do the sellers need to own the property free and clear in order to offer the buyer, seller financing, or how does that work?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. It's a little more complicated if it is. I mean, there's a different structure to it. If the property is free and clear, it's a simple note and trust deed, just like a bank would have if you took out a mortgage. Simple note and trust deed. They become, first lien position. You're making your mortgage payment to them. If there's a loan on the property, you usually have to do it as a land sell contract or a subject to. You're essentially, creating a legal structure wrap the loan without having the due on sales clause get triggered. So you're probably familiar with the due on sales clause. If your listeners aren't, essentially, if you sell the property or you switch title, the bank has the ability. It's very rare that they do this, but they have the ability technically to say, "Hey, you don't own this anymore. You just changed title. We want to be paid in full." And so a land sale contract subject to protects that a little bit more. It's I can't say it wouldn't, but it's essentially going to be more difficult for a bank to trigger that due on sales clause and say, "Hey, you owe me right now. Pay this off."
That makes sense. What are some things that you wish that you knew first when you were looking for seller financing deals that you know now?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot because I get asked that, like, what would you have done differently, or would you have done anything differently? And I don't know. I have mixed feelings, and I have like two lines of like thought on it, because I feel like there's a part of me that's like, oh, I should have done bigger deals.
Yeah. And
I should have done more deals and bigger deals. At the same time, like, the first deal gave me the confidence to do the next one, which gave me the confidence to do the next one. The first seller finance deal gave me the confidence to do the next one. The first mobile home park deal gave me the confidence to do the next one. And so it's, I could go back and say, oh, I should have bought more, or I should have bought bigger, but I bought everything that I possibly felt like I could at that time. And so I think part of it is that mindset of allowing your mind to think bigger, because bigger deals, I don't think, are really any harder. In fact, in some ways, I'd say they're easier, because as you start moving into larger deals, you're actually dealing with sellers that are investors themselves.
Yep.
And you're dealing with banks that, if you're going to do a refi, you're dealing with banks that understand investing more. And so I think a lot of people, it's a mindset thing where it's hard to get their mind past a single family home, or a lot of people get stuck on a duplex. Right? Like they don't believe that they can do or buy anything more than a duplex. So that becomes a very competitive market, because a lot of people are looking for duplexes. But if you're dealing with sellers that are investors themselves, and you really focus on the relationship aspect of it, and I know I'm only kind of answering your question here, but I think the relationship part of it's most important, because that's where deals get made. Like, the reason I sold those properties to the couple that I did is we had built a relationship. It wasn't just some stranger asking me to carry finance with no money down. Even though I bought with no money down, people I don't really know, I focused on it being the relationship. How can I just get to know them? I mean, I used to hand deliver my mortgage payment to this one woman in particular every single month, just because I wanted to have that FaceTime. Well, who do you think she called when she wanted to sell her next property? She called me. We had that relationship. When I paid her off, when I refinanced this property in 2014, she said, "What am I going to do with that money?" And I had never borrowed private money. I said, "You could lend it back to me." And she thought I was kidding. And a couple months later, she's like, "I thought about it. Are you serious?" And I was like, "Sure." And then she financed the deal for me. She did that because we had 6 years of trust. We had 6 years of me making a mortgage payment to her on time. Yeah. So that relationship didn't end just because, hey, I paid her off and now it doesn't exist, right? I focused on building a relationship with this woman, not it being transactional. Not like, hey, thanks for making me money, goodbye. It was, hey, this was awesome. Like, you benefited, I benefited. Like, how can we help each other into the future?
Yeah, I love that. She didn't even want to get paid off, but yeah, you paid her off, but you still were able to turn into another win-win situation for something she wanted. I love that. You mentioned the word relationship, many times already. It's like, what are some things that you do to build those relationships with people? Are you doing anything special?
I don't know. I think I like people. I enjoy people, right? Like, some of the most amazing friendships that I've made, are through GoBundance. You mentioned GoBundance at the beginning of the call, and outside of my family, like, a lot of the relationships that I have been built either directly or indirectly through GoBundance. And so, but also through even jumping on these on podcasts. Like, I've had people reach out to me, and sometimes it's just, hey, a simple thanks, I needed to hear that. Sometimes they're showing me a deal or asking something. And other times they become people that I really enjoy pouring into because they're out there, doing that thing. But I think ultimately, when I meet someone, I don't care if it's like, I'm not trying to get anything from them. Like, I may meet someone and it may be they become an acquaintance, but they might become a lifelong friend, and maybe we'll do business together. But I never go into it like, oh, what can I get from them? Can I somehow make money? Like, I just try not to look at it transactional. And I think for me, it's just kind of my nature. Like I enjoy people. I enjoy having conversations with people. I enjoy learning from people. I enjoy talking with people. But I think it's also not being afraid to put yourself out there. I mean, I realized early on that very first house I bought, it was 2005, right? So it was very, very competitive. But that first house I bought was off market. It was a friend of my realtor's son, right? And then the second house I bought, and so I'm staying in this house knowing what the market price is, and they're agreeing to sell it to me for less. And I'm like, no one else knows this is for sale. The second house is because in my mind, I decided I was an investor, made a business card. I owned one home, rented out 2 of the rooms, and had a business card saying I'm an investor, and gave it to a guy at the gym. And that's how I found my second house off market. Nice. In a hot market. And so I guess what I'm saying, like, if you don't go out there and tell people what you're looking for, no one's just going to bring you a deal. No one's going to say, hey, here's this deal I have for you, if they don't know what you're looking for. And I mean, just like calling that developer out of the blue and saying, hey, I admire your work, I'd love to know your story. 10 years later, that led to a deal, but my intention wasn't like, how do I get a deal from this guy? I was just wanted to know his story. I walked into I share this a lot too, because it's funny, and my lender laughs about it. I walked into the hard money lender's office probably looking like a completely crazy person years before I ever asked to borrow hard money. I'm like, my name's Gabriel Hamel. I'm getting into real estate investing. We'll probably do business together one day, and kind of shaking my hand like, okay, what? All right, sure. But we stayed in touch. And then, since then I've borrowed millions and millions of dollars, but we built that relationship and then the track record. And it wasn't, I didn't go in there saying, hey, I'm buying a house tomorrow and I need money, and they have no idea who I am. And so I just kind of take kind of an organic, holistic approach to it. Yeah. It's just part of my life, I guess. It's just part of what I do.
Yeah. But it's like, I mean, but what I'm getting out of this is nobody could read your mind. You really got to just talking to people and just start, articulating, just verbalizing what you're looking for. And I feel people truly want to help other people. And it's like, in your cases, it's like you build that relationship and they think of you and they want to help you out too. It's just like you're really good at leaving. That's what I'm getting now. You're really good at leaving a lasting impression and just keeping that relationship going. So like, that's awesome. Hey, in terms of like focus now, it's like, for asset classes, you're invested in a good amount of them. Is there like a main focus for asset class right now, or are you just are you looking at multiple things?
Yeah, it's kind of shifted. So kind of we were just saying about letting people know what you're looking for. So all those years I was looking for small multifamily in a specific neighborhood. That's what I would tell people, and those are the conversations I would have. And then that led to small multifamily in that area, right? 2019, I shifted towards mobile home parks. So what was I saying? Hey, I'm looking for mobile home parks in this area, and I ended up with mobile home parks in that area, right?
Yeah.
But again, I'm telling everybody. So I was really focused, in 2019, 2020, 2021 in the mobile home park space. The first one was letting a broker know, hey, they kept sending me apartments. I'm like, I'm not interested. Here's what I'm looking for. They got an in-house listing, bought it, told my property manager who manages a lot of my parks, has brought me multiple deals. So that's really been my focus. Now I'm kind of shifting into more commercial properties. I think we're going into a very interesting kind of unknown real estate market right now. So I'm doing a few things. I refinanced 4 of my initial mobile home parks at the end of last year and early this year. When I felt like we were kind of at the top of the market, interest rates were still low. Right. I'd like to say I timed that perfectly. I mean, but it was just a kind of a gut feeling of interest rates are low and prices are high. It's a good time to refi. But I'm just looking for opportunities. I closed earlier this year in 5 industrial complexes. But again, as I said before, the fundamentals of investing doesn't change. I'm looking at, a strong cash on cash return. On the commercial stuff, I want a strong tenant. It's the numbers have to make sense. And so I'll buy in an up market, a down market, a sideways market, as long as the financials make sense. And I personally think one of the best ways to hedge your risk, I was just talking about this on a call earlier today, is owning more real estate, right? Like if it's kind of the whole analogy of, hey, if you have a single family home and they move out, 100% of your income's gone. You have 4 units and one moves out, you still have 3/4 of your income. And so, so I have those industrial complexes, and it's my largest purchase to date. And I'm looking at like I should buy more bigger deals that cash flow more long term. Say I have 10 big commercial properties and one of those goes vacant. Well, that's a lot of income. But if I have 9 other, commercial properties that are kicking off that income, that actually hedges my risk while I'm building assets, while I'm acquiring more cash, producing assets. And so it's just kind of a shift for me. I've done some private money lending this year. But ultimately that's just in the interim as I'm looking to buy more assets.
Okay. No, I love that. It's just a great way to stay diversified and whatnot, which is what you were saying.
That was a long answer to your question. Sorry.
No, that's totally cool. You're doing a lot. I'm curious do you have a big team or staff even helping you, or, you work with a ton of business partners, or how does I take it you're doing a lot of this with other people. What does your team look like? People are helping you.
Yeah, you might be surprised. I don't have so I bought an RV park earlier in the year. So separate from a long-term tenant at mobile home parks. And I hired my first W-2 employee to run that park. He's full-time at that park, ass kicker of a manager, his background. The guy's amazing, runs that, because the RV park is more of a business than just the real estate. That's a business, very operational.
Okay.
That guy's there full-time, lives on site, is phenomenal. Outside of that, I don't have employees. I rely heavily on my property managers. I don't own the property management company. I am not a licensed agent or broker. And so the thing that's really allowed me to own my time is I focus on the big picture stuff. And so I don't spend hours and hours and hours working. I don't cram my day. Usually if I'm working on something, it's a new deal or something within the business, but we're talking a couple hours a week. But it's my third party property managers that are probably the strongest part of my team. And then I have a lot of agents and brokers that know what I'm looking for that send me deals. So a lot of it's deal flow. And then again, the property management is what allows me to own my time more than anything.
Yeah. I'm glad that I asked the question. That wasn't the answer I was even expecting to hear, to be honest with you. It's you have really good control of your time. They always say simple is better, but you really kept it so simple. Yeah. It's very simple.
I think I was really clear on what I wanted real estate to do for me. Right. And it was that realization is I wanted my time freedom, and I didn't want to build something that would take away so much of my time where I wasn't able to enjoy life, where I wasn't able to, travel or hang out with my family or just do the things that it was about the freedom of just doing what I want to do. And I've watched people that want out of their W-2 and then they build something, and maybe you got to grind for a while, but there is this grind mentality in our country, in our society, where it's working more, you're going to get more. And that's not always the case. And a lot of times working more, it's actually going to take you away from why you got into investing in the first place. And I've watched people, even some of our friends who are in GoBundance, they got into real estate investing because they wanted more time to do whatever it was, whether it was with family or to travel, whatever it was. And then they built themselves into a corner where they're like, oh my gosh, I went from working 40 hours a week to 100 hours a week. And they hate it, or they won't remove themselves from the business. I've just been really cautious about what am I good at? I'm not good at property management. I don't want to run this big team. I don't want to be responsible for a whole bunch of people, but I can hire third-party property management that does a better job managing than me, and let them do what they're good at, right? And still have my time. So yes, I considered opening the property management company. I'm like, no, that doesn't align with the things that are important to me. I considered opening, getting my license to open a brokerage. I'm like, it doesn't align with what I actually want in my life. Even if it made me twice the amount of money, I don't want to put the time and effort into that. My best use of time is probably thinking and then putting deals together. And outside of that, it's my health, it's my time with my family, it's time to travel, and it's the time to do whatever that I want.
Yeah, you're very clear on what you want, and it's inspiring to me. Speaking of what you're good at, so what do you have a main superpower? It's or do you have, what do you say if somebody asks you that question? What is your main superpower?
Gosh, I don't know. I've been asked that before. I don't know about superpower. Some people they just know. I mean, I think my superpower, something I think I'm good at is I will make something happen if I want it bad enough. Like I truly believe, like if we want something bad enough, we'll find a way.
Okay.
And so, I would say in some ways, like believe it in my mind. Like I would convince myself in my mind that something is possible and that will happen and manifest that. Like, and it happens, right? So, whether it was, building a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. I mean, I was telling people that when I was living in my friend's attic for $100 a month, and they're like, "You're crazy. How are you going to build this real estate? You live in an attic, like Quasimodo. Like, what are you talking about?" And like, I don't know how, but I will, right? That RV park I closed on that I mentioned about having this amazing employee. I bought that without someone lined up to run it. I had never hired an employee. I knew I needed someone. I asked the current owners if the previous owners, they could stay on for a little bit. But I knew in my mind, I need to buy that property. The numbers look good.
Yeah.
Then I have this guy drive 400 miles to meet me. He has a background in like doing this all over the country previously. And he's like, I want to live here. And I want to, then he drives 5 hours after driving 400 miles to meet me and goes and stays at the park. Right. And so it's like, I don't know, law of attraction or something.
Yeah.
I just believed it would happen. And then the right people show up at the right time. It just happens.
Okay. Well, wow. How did you find this guy out of curiosity? Just a post on the internet?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So he called me. I put literally I had never hired someone, because I said I just relied on the third party property managers, and I put a thing on Indeed and some other thing, and like, it's just some crazy calls, and in the RV industry, you get a lot of like traveling folks, and I wanted someone there full time, and I get this call from this guy, and he's like, "Hey, I used to do this for a couple all over the country. They would buy places that were running okay, and I would go and make these run better." And he's like, "I just want to be in one place." This is over in Eastern Oregon. I don't want to run an RV park in Eastern Oregon. He loves it. Like he doesn't want to be anywhere else. He's like, he wants to be there forever and do this. And I knew as soon as he drove 400 miles to meet me, like he had the background, and he also had the grit. Like he's ridiculous. Like he sent me a picture the other day of like the office, and then he sends me a picture and was like, "Look what I did today," and the entire exterior is painted. Like I didn't ask him to do that. Like, I mean, like he just did that because it's a lot of the bookings have been automated, and he's just like, "Hey, look, I made this space 12 feet bigger." Like he just
wow.
So I let him do, he's way better at it than I would be. Like that's his experience. So I let him do what he's good at. I let my property managers do what they're good at, and I focus on the big picture stuff.
I love it. He's doing all the thinking for you, things that you didn't even think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Above and beyond. So any big goals that you're working on, just over the next 12 months or so, personal or business?
Yeah, over the 12 months, in certain areas I'm pretty goal oriented. Like I just try to look at big picture. I don't sometimes with goals, I don't like creating things. Like I really like to implement more just practices, right? Like there's certain things that I do that I keep doing, working out and jumping on podcasts, jumping on some of the GoBundance calls and stuff. Like that's important to me and just kind of keeps my mind active. I want to build, $100 million portfolio over the next couple of years. If I hit that, great. If I decide to go bigger, great. Like I think the biggest thing is like I enjoy the real estate game. I enjoy it. And so sometimes people ask like, when's the stopping point or when's enough? This is just part of me. And unless I stop enjoying it, I'm going to keep doing it. I like the game of it.
Yeah, I get it. Could you, it's like, this might be a hard question for you, but it's like, if you weren't doing real estate, what the heck do you think you'd be doing?
Yeah, I love to travel. I've got to go to some really neat places, over the last couple of years. I like to see the world. I like to support my kids and what they're doing, and so I'd like to see more. Like every time I go somewhere amazing, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many more other parts of the world that I haven't seen. Even that 2-month road trip we talked about.
Yep.
I had no interest in doing that. I'm like, I don't want to get an RV and go. I was like, I want to go travel internationally. My wife's like, no, I want to do this. Like, let's go do this. And I think it's one of the most amazing things we've done, And so, the more things I do, the more things I see, I realize there's just even more things to see. But, so traveling's important, and time with the family, and then working out. And it's, we fill our day. Like, I don't cram my day with stuff, but I put things in my life that add value. Like, I love the mastermind calls that I'm on. I love jumping on podcasts and talking about this stuff. Like, to me, it's one of the most rewarding things there is like when people reach out and say, hey, I did my first seller finance deal. Right. I had someone this week tell me they just quit their W-2 job at Amazon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they reached out to me 3 years ago after the Bigger Pockets podcast I was on, but they stayed in touch. And so it's like, I love that. I love pouring back into those that are doing it. So I don't know. I don't find, it's not like I'm just sitting around, watching TV all day and doing nothing. Like, I find things to put in my life that continually enrich my life. And yeah, sometimes it is like, all right, what do I need to do to step up this area of my life? And in all areas of my life. But it's not like I'm just sitting around doing nothing.
I got
It's not usually, sometimes.
Last question. So how can somebody get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best way is Instagram. Just Gabriel R. Hamel. And I'm fairly active on Instagram.
That very, very cool. So that's a wrap, guys. This is all the time we have for today. Thanks, Gabe, for joining me on this episode. Thanks for sharing your story and just your overall real estate journey. You live like a life by design that many people envy, and just like, especially all that time freedom you have. But you built that, and you deserve that. And even I'm trying to emulate some of what you got going on in my life. So thanks for being authentic and just showing that it can be done. It's like, and I'm looking forward to seeing your own growth and whatnot. And I know I'm going to see you at a future Spartan Race and Go Abundance events. So looking forward to that. And to my listeners, feel free to reach out to Gabe if you have any questions for him. And also, thanks for checking out this episode of the School of Cash Flow. Leave a podcast review on iTunes, as it helps me attract even more great guests just like Gabe. So until next time, live life abundantly. Thanks, Gabe.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. Thanks for having me on. Always good to connect.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the School of Cash Flow. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into all the tips and tricks you can use to help you on your passive investing journey. In the meantime, you may visit www.cashflowschoolpodcast.com for more great episodes. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. That's all for this episode, folks. See you next time.